just so I can share it with you guys after. Cool. All right, we'll get started. So, a little bit about my background. So, I currently manage the design team at Bridebook. Bridebook are a wedding marketplace based in the UK. We are in 135 countries, and I've been building the design team there over the last sort of year and a half. We're a marketplace, so we're essentially Airbnb for weddings. So you can search for your venues, you can search for your musicians, and we sort of put them in contact with couples, and that's how we sort of work as a marketplace. Um, so that's what I've been doing. My journey to that point is quite varied, and I'm going to go through sort of how I got to that point. So I've been in design for the last sort of 14 years or so. I started my career in product design, studying actual industrial design, because it was an area that I found really interesting. And I also went into my first role working for Reebok. So I used to design fitness equipment. So essentially, everything you see in the gym is what I would end up designing. So it was quite interesting at first, but back then, that's when apps became a little bit more popular. Things like companion apps. Today, things like Peloton, Second Nature, but starting to work on some of those products was really interesting to me, and that's the path I ended up taking more of a digital designer approach. And then I moved into working at some agencies, so working with really large brands such as BP, Santander, Roland Garros, working with client side, trying to sell and pitch projects, how to really work out how to storytell the designs that you're creating. So it's a great way to learn if you're working in industries and agencies. Before later in my career, moving into more large corporate businesses such as Sainsbury's, working on some of their B2C and B2B products. And in the last kind of 5 or 6 years, I've been working at startups and scale ups. So coming in and with a very small design team, scaling up that team, I worked previously at Marshmallow, who are a fintech unicorn. When I joined, I was about the 20th employee. When I left, there was about 600. So understanding that kind of growth period is really interesting until my most recent role at Bridebook, where yeah, we recently got some funding in Series B, and we're growing the team as we go. Cool. So that's just a little bit about me, and then about Crafted. So Crafted is a business that I founded to essentially help redefine traditional education design. So from my journey of kind of doing a degree and then learning along the way, there's so many different again learnings and sort of tips that I wish I had, and that's kind of what brought out Crafted UX. So we try and break the mold of sort of methodology heavy courses. We try and give real practical case studies and skills that you can use straight into getting jobs and to use in your day-to-day roles today. And the goal really is to just get more people into design, making it more accessible. I'll talk a little bit later on about some of the courses that we run, but that's just a little bit about Crafted. Cool. So I'm going to start with career paths. So I'm going to talk through a few truths today. And these are truths that I've learned over my career and other designers and leaders have shared with me, and things that I wish I'd known earlier on. So hopefully they're useful for you guys. But the first one is around there's no kind of golden path for a designer. So there's no perfect background that a design manager looks for when hiring a designer. So don't worry about if you've worked in marketing, if you've worked as a teacher. It really doesn't matter. It's about what you've done along the way to build your skill set up. And that's what really we're looking for when you're hiring for those kind of roles. So it's really not about you doing a degree and so on. It's around the story. It's around the steps you're making and the skills you're trying to learn to become a better designer. And that could be outside of your work. It could be looking for a mentor. It could be doing charity projects. Could be doing audits on websites that you use or apps that you use that you're a fan of. There are many different ways that you can do that. So the roles within UX are so varied, and I'm sure everyone on this call probably has a different level of experience with UX and design, but we're responsible for so many different skills that it's hard to believe sometimes. We're meant to be quite generalists in design, so you're not just creating the final screens, you're understanding what copy to write, you're understanding how to run research, how to work with engineers and talk technically to them, also understanding user psychology and why people make decisions, alongside how to build products on a global basis to appeal to certain cultures. So there's so many different areas that's fascinating to learn as a designer, and that's what makes the job really interesting and fulfilling from my perspective. But what that comes down to, and what businesses are really interested in, is how you can also understand the objectives of what they're trying to do, how you can sort of research the problem space and design those solutions. They're the three core things that will sort of help guide you as a main focus as a designer. But essentially, we are very T-shaped and generally sort of covering many different aspects, which is daunting but also very interesting for skill growth. And you might be very familiar with some of these roles, but this is the kind of standard career path that sits in industry today. So everything from junior, moving to middleweight designers up to leads, and then going into more management positions. So this is, I guess, the standard career path, which would definitely vary depending on the size of business. If you're working for Spotify, they might have even more levels than this. If you're working at a startup, they might only have 2 or 3 levels. So it really does vary on your sort of environment. But one role that's really interesting that's come into the industry the last couple of years is the founding designer. So this is the first person that comes into the design and product team in startups. They're responsible for pretty much everything around getting the product off the ground, which is a really exciting role to have. And you'll learn a lot. You'll work with the leaders of the business as well. So I always kind of advise the students and other individuals that it's a great role to look out for to get a lot of experience early on in your career. And they're becoming more and more apparent in the industry that you'll see. So that's the general career path. And this definitely does vary around levels of experience, and you can move through faster than this if you're working hard, if you're showing your skill growth. But generally, it's sort of 2 to 3 years moving up those levels until you get into those kind of manager positions, up to VP and chief design officer and so on. So if you're wondering around sort of how long it might take, that's the general sort of time span in UK-based companies. But yeah, if you're working for a startup or a smaller business, they can definitely be sped up. And I also get a lot of questions from designers around salaries and what's a good salary and what should be expected. And these are just some ranges that are sort of qualified from some reports at the moment. But what I just tried to get through to here, if you are currently in a role and you're not in these bandings, these are something you should always be aware of, always be checking to know what your kind of value is. But also if you're coming into design for the first time, it's a great industry. It does pay very well. And if you build up the right skills, you can move forward very fast in your career to those lead and design manager levels and beyond, which is great. Just some insights. If you do work for a smaller business, generally their salaries are lower, but you'll get equity, which is great if the business is successful. And then if you're obviously working for a larger company, they'll have probably better benefits, which I'm sure you'll know anyway, but it also depends on what's right for you around flexible working hours and training budgets and so on. If you really want to spend more time in training, then you want to look for a business that meets those kind of requirements as well. Okay, now we're going to go into a little bit about goals and development. So something that I was told earlier in my career that really shaped how I drove my own learning was around sort of people won't. So if you don't take charge of your career, nobody else will really. So no one's going to push for your promotions. No one's going to help you learn new skills, put you out of your comfort zone, unless you're really driving that first. So it's a real mindset thing here of how you can kind of help yourself push forward and grow as a designer. And it's also good to kind of take a step backwards. And again, I get questions from designers that are more junior around sort of where should I be looking for roles, what kind of industries? And I always flip that back to them in a sense of what's important to you? What are your general goals? Are you someone that's very salary driven that just wants people you paid very well for your role? Are you someone that's really passionate about an industry if you want to work in, I don't know, finance, if you want to work in health and fitness? If you want to work in travel, they're the things that you should be building your portfolio around to pitch yourself to those type of businesses. Do you want to be a people manager? Do you want to mentor people as your general skill set, or would you rather just work on projects that are pushing you as an individual contributor, an IC that we call it in the industry? Or the other one and the other aspect is, do you want to build your own business? Is that your long-term goal? Because if it is, then that will really shape your career path. You'll want to work for smaller businesses where you wear more hats. You'll get closer exposure to marketing, to finance, to the CEO, and ask all those questions and get all those learnings firsthand. So it's really important to take a step back and understand where you want to get to, and that will help you set your general career goals in order to feel fulfilled in what you're working towards every day. And just some really sort of, I guess, practical tips that I've done and designers do that they've shared with me over the years is look ahead. So if you're in a current role that's junior basis, or even if you're not even in the design industry just yet, always have a look on LinkedIn or other adverts sites, see what those requirements are for what they're asking to apply for. And that is essentially your training guide. If you can hit all those bullet points of what they're looking for and show evidence of that, then you're going to be in a great position to interview for that role and move forward and get to where you want to. So it's a great sense check if you're looking at sort of roles, look at those bullet points across businesses that you want to work for, and try and build a portfolio and certain projects that hit those bullet points. Because you'll be very, very ready when you come around to interviewing. You have all that evidence ready for them. And it's a good way just to sense check again what they're looking for in industry. Because it can change. People might be looking for more visual-based designers or motion versus more strategic. It does change from kind of year to year, so it's always good to keep your finger on the pulse there. And setting goals is something that I find really valuable to keep myself on track generally. It's something that we always kind of bang the drum to at Crafted, and it really does help kind of get to where you want to. There's a few facts that I read recently around New Year's resolutions, actually, and I think it's around 60% of people set New Year's resolutions at the start of the year. After 2 months, only about 15% of them keep to them, which isn't great. But if you do tell two people, then you have an 80% chance you'll carry on your New Year's resolutions. So what that really says is there's such a power in accountability of you setting your goals, you telling your partner, your friend, and kind of manifesting them in a certain way to help bring them and becoming a lot more realistic. So I always sort of advocate for smart goals, measurable goals, and having kind of an example here of if you want to move from a junior to a middleweight or move from an internship to a junior, wherever you are in your career, set that as your annual goal. What are those milestones that you want to get to that will help you move forward? It could be by completing certain projects. It might be that you have a hole in your portfolio that you haven't worked on any app-based work, but you know that's sort of holding you back to move forward. So you might really double down on that or ask to work on that work in your current role. It might be around being a bit more numbers focused, so having some impact on projects where you might increase retention, as an example here, something that's very measurable, and again you can show proof in your portfolio. Or it might be something external. It might be that you start mentoring with other designers or other people, and that's something that again helps build those skills and builds your softer skills to move up to those roles. And then setting the time base is again just something to help keep you on track. On top of that, there's a little bit around sort of secondary skills and having that growth mindset. So it's really important to have that self-awareness as a designer and to understand where your weaknesses are, and not just to kind of avoid them week after week. It's easy to work on your strengths, but to understand where you can improve and work on those and kind of get uncomfortable with working on those skills. And that's why it's really important. I advocate for getting feedback from other designers and other people that you work with to see where they think you can improve on. That might not always align with what you think. But it's a great way to kind of, again, build on those gaps. And then also just don't underestimate the softer skills of being a designer. So you can be the best visual designer in the world, you can create an amazing experience, but if you can't tell the story of why you got to that decision to the business, then you won't get the credit that you deserve. So sometimes the smaller, softer skills are actually really important to help you stand out in a business and to help you get to where you want to. So yeah, things like presentation, communication, storytelling, they only get better through practice and getting feedback. So Again, I'd always advocate for that kind of feedback loop wherever you are. If it's in a business, if it's with colleagues, if it's with friends, wherever your network is, it's a really useful part. The second part to that is kind of finding a mentor. So if you don't already have one, I couldn't sort of speak louder about how important having a mentor is. I've had one throughout my whole career, not the same person. It's changed every few years or so, and they can show up in many different ways. It's not something that is a monthly hour session that you chat to them about. It could just be a text message here. How do you deal with this situation? Do you have any advice? It can completely vary, but it should be someone that you look up to, someone that you want your career to go in a similar direction. Um, how does one find a mentor, Dennis? So I'll go to that a little bit later on the questions, but with a few examples. Um, but yeah, essentially there is sites that do exist. There's one called ADP List, which is a great one to find a mentor. You've also got your own network that you should start thinking about. So that's thinking around people you might have gone to school with, might people you might have started working with, you've got an in initial relationship with. If there's someone there, that's great. If not, just use LinkedIn and just message out to people that are in roles that you aspire to again. Ask them if they're happy to have a chat, ask a few questions. You'll really be really surprised by how open people are to giving help and feedback and to help guide people in their careers. Sort of 50% of the time, I'm sure you'll get a response and people will help out. So don't be afraid to ask is the kind of the message there. But generally, you need to prepare to get in. You get in what you put up. You get out what you put in with those sessions, and be prepared with questions about what you want to learn. It's not on the mentor to kind of guide you from ground up. So really be targeted with what you want to get their feedback on. If it's project work, if it's about how they got to in their career, if it's about how they're finding their current role, whatever you think you need to help with at that point, just be very clear and upfront with them. So yeah, this is a really good point to have a mentor and to check in with them. And in the start of your career, you might have more sort of sessions with your mentor. You might have multiple mentors from different types of businesses. As you go on, they're kind of more of your allies, and they also move into your network. So if you're ever looking for a role, they'll be the number one supporter for you and will share things with you. So the benefits are enormous there. So go through a little bit around pushing for promotions and some practical tips around how you can kind of, I guess, maneuver around these conversations at work or into future roles that you might have. So one interesting point is your manager is or can be your biggest ally. So I'm sure we've all worked with people and managers that some might be better than others, but really they're the first person that can shout from the rooftops about what you're doing. The second people are your peers, and they're kind of your secret weapon. So I touched on earlier before around if you have people that are giving you positive feedback, you've asked for it, that is great evidence to say, hey, look, I'm doing a great job. Um, is there any reason why I can't be pushing for this next level? Because the evidence is building up in your sort of profile. There's a few industry insights here around sort of if you're not aware of, and I guess it's always good to reflect. So average promotions are normally around 10%, and if you're getting a promotion in a design role and you're not getting a 10% increase, that's something that I would definitely look at. Just generally in question. Always know your value is something that I think is very important as a designer. The average time spent between roles in designer roles is normally around 3 years. So again, if you're maybe in a current role, you've been there for longer than 3 years, try and have a little bit of reflection, understand what's at that next level and where you could move to, because there's a certain timeline that you could keep to and push for. General sort of average performance bonuses are around 2K, which is a 2 to 4% of your salary in design roles and tech companies. And if you're ever interested in moving into management positions, businesses are normally looking for sort of 7 or 8 years of experience doing the design work before moving into those, which can definitely be moved for a little bit earlier if you're working in a small company. So what's quite important is around a growth mindset. So it's really important to understand in businesses that they all have a finite budget. They can't give all their money, unfortunately, to promotions every year. I wish that was the case. Everyone would be a lot happier. So essentially, with knowing that information that you have, X amount of money each year, you really have to fight for your case, and show that you're the highest performer in the business. So not just in your design team, but across the business. And something that, again, I've seen being really successful in my past is looking at the highest performers in the business, those people that are really impressive, whatever their job is. What are those traits that they're doing? Is it they're very good at building relationships with people. They're advocates. They're improving processes in the business. Could be many different things. So have a little think about if you're in a current role, how you can go above and beyond to get noticed and improve processes. So this could be how you run your user research using new tools, how you use AI in the business, how you can save people time. That's very hot topic at the moment, and one that all businesses are trying to use in the best way, in the most powerful way. How you can maybe work on multiple projects, so go above and beyond what you're even expected to do. You could start mentoring other people in your team or junior people, also people that aren't in the design team. You could help upskill them in how to do research, how to come up with ideas, how to run workshops. There's so many of those soft skills that you could pass on to other members. And just consider a consistent growth mindset. So if you're reading articles, you're listening to podcasts, if you're immersing yourself in the design world, you're going to pick up so many little nuggets, even from Instagram and what you're watching, that you could pass on them to the team and people would find helpful. And if you're the person that's sharing that consistently, you're going to be seen as someone that has that growth mindset and is standing above the rest. So it's always a good kind of way to think about how you can keep pushing that forward. And there's a few key factors that are around sort of those performance and goals, and to help you push for those promotions if you're currently in a position and you're trying to move up or for future roles. So one is setting those goals, those performance goals, so measurable and specific. Set those with your managers and make sure that they're ambitious but also achievable within 3 months, so you don't lose track of them. Record your case studies. Couldn't shout more about that one. So every project that you should write a little document around what was the goal for the business, what was the sort of the process you went through, what are the steps you did, what's the testing, the research, and so on. How did you get to that final design? And then when you released it, what was the impact? What was the sort of metrics that you pushed? That's all evidence of the great work that you've done. And even if you're not in a role now, you can do that with sort of case studies. If you want to look at an app and do a review of it and give your view on how you can improve it, you can kind of put that together yourself as a case study for a portfolio. Generally getting feedback. So we talked about talking to relevant team members and understanding your performance level, and then areas that you could develop in and those gaps. And then the last one's just around knowing your value. So understanding what that market rate is for your role, your amount of experience, your salary. Also just speaking to your team as well and other people to hear sort of their path even if it's on a salary basis. It's something that's not talked about much, but it only hurts the employees from my perspective if people don't share the kind of those insights. But they'll give you the evidence you need and the backing to pitch whatever it is you think you deserve in your role. Nice. Okay, we've got the last few sections coming up, and then we can go through some questions if you have any. So building your network and brand is a really important one. That essentially, the stronger your network and your profile, the more opportunities you'll find. And we touched on mentoring earlier. That's one part of building a great network. It's really going to help you throughout your career. So building that network, there's many ways that you can do that. And yeah, I'll go through a few examples that I found useful and other designers that I've worked with have found useful. But yeah, essentially just being a little bit more out there with going to meetups, going to events, meeting other designers or people who want to get into the industry, adding their LinkedIn, keeping that conversation going, getting their feedback on some of your designs, portfolios, to start building that relationship. I mentioned reaching out to other designers on LinkedIn. So just searching on there for designers that work for certain companies and giving them a message. You can also kind of volunteer for projects. So if you're someone that's not in a current role in design, but really interested in getting into it, then have a look at some charities online that you support or are a fan of, and sort of approach them and say, hey, I'd love to improve your website. Can I Can I run some sessions with you and some interviews and so on? So really being proactive there is a great way for you to get real insight with a client and get some feedback. And that's a perfect portfolio project for you to have and shows a lot of initiative, which will stand well in interviews in the future. You could even approach some startups. There's some links I can share post this session around lists of businesses that start with only a few employees that really want as much help as possible at the start. So you can look to start and partner with them with internships and so on. And then there's the roles that you're obviously in at the moment. What are those relationships you have with your colleagues? How do you kind of nurture those? How do you keep them once you move on as well? That's a strong part of your network that is a good place to keep. If you work with great people, make sure you kind of stay in touch because they'll probably move into great roles. They'll probably end up hiring for strong positions, and it kind of moves on in that case. Personal brand is also one that's really important, especially as a designer. There's so many different ways to market yourself, from your CV to your portfolio to when you talk through in interviews. And it's a very sort of it can be a very busy environment as well. So really understanding what you want your angle to be, how you want to be seen as your profile. So on the right hand side, you can see a few examples here of some landing pages of portfolios. They're all very different. Someone's maybe pitched themselves more as a coach, someone that's more of an illustrator, someone that's an out and out product designer that just develops products and delivers them. And that goes through to your LinkedIn profile and how you kind of market yourself and describe your skills and what you showcase. And then also thinking about the type of designer you want to be. So earlier on, we talked about the kind of the basis of being a IC or a people manager or wanting to start your own business, those initial sort of career goals. But within design, there's so many different aspects that you can go down. There's just as four examples, there's being a UX designer, so someone that's a bit more strategy based, someone that works on research, the problem space, but doesn't get into the visual design side as much or the branding side as much. The product designer would do more of that, or a visual designer would do more of that. Do you want to be kind of a generalist or a specialist? Do you want to work in a specific industry? Do you want to just be known for working in fintech, or do you want to kind of be a generalist and expose yourself to loads of different roles? There's pros and cons for both. And then there's kind of freelance versus permanent roles. So freelance is great for getting a loads of different experience in a short space of time. It's probably a more highly pressured environment because you've got deadlines with clients and people that you're just trying to create relationships very quickly. So that's just a bit of something to balance for you. Permanent roles, you have more time to adapt. You have a more stable team. Your work will be a bit slower than a freelancer, but you'll have a better way to learn and sort of build your skill set and experience if you're in a permanent role. The last bit's just around how it makes you different. So we all have our own individual quirks and our own individual interests, and I would just say embrace those. So some of the best portfolios I've seen have had a separate tab on them that says kind of studio or playground. Someone showing that they do pottery, knitting, they make music in their spare time, which gives just a lens into what they are, what their mindset is, their creativity, and interest. So if you have passions, don't be afraid to include them in your portfolio CV. I think it goes a long way with giving your identity and helping you stand out as well. So that's something I'll definitely push for. Excuse me. And just touching a little bit on portfolio. So you should always think about your portfolio if you've started one or about to thinking about building one, which is quite an asset when as a designer applying for roles, is essentially a shop window. So it's a way for you to intrigue, but you don't need to really give everything away. That's the main question or the main point there. So how can you kind of build the suspense there and get them interested in what you do, but not spending too much time in building out your projects step by step because it's very time consuming for a portfolio. So if your CV is essentially a snapshot, your portfolio is your story of how you've got to where you are, what you've learned, what's worked, what hasn't worked. It's great to be honest, and there's no design project that I've worked on that's gone perfectly. You always mess up in some way, or you'll never go with your first design that you create. It's normally your seventh or eighth or 10th. Someone might have a better idea than you, which you have to be humble enough to take on board and improve. It's kind of being open to that with that mindset that the team builds the product, you are part of it, you're leading part of it, but you're working together with a group of people to deliver a great solution. So yeah, it's different ways to how you can lay out your portfolio, and we have some modules in our courses at Crafted that can talk you through a bit more detail about how to create portfolios and step-by-step guidance. But at a high level, there's ways that you can be more visual. There's ways that you can be a bit more narrative driven with stories and telling them people about the steps that you went through. There's no real need to have every single bullet point of what you did. It's really important to kind of set the problem space. What was the acts that you did? What's the value you delivered? And then what was the impact of what you released? So as an example, if you worked for Spotify and you worked on their, let's say, uh, their Wrapped feature. So at the end of the year, everyone gets their Wrapped or summary of music they've listened to. One of your main goals from the business there might be to improve retention of users by 15%, getting them to sign up for next year. Because you're showing that kind of personalization touch to it, which is a nice way to keep users around. So just understanding that metric as part of the goal and showing that throughout your project and showing how that delivered at the end shows your business awareness, which is something that design managers and hirers and recruiters definitely look out for. So understanding that as well is very important. Some other truths around portfolios. So as I mentioned, it's really important for them to be eye-catching. So what is that intrigue that you can build on your landing page? Every page doesn't need to be beautiful, doesn't need to spend hours on it. It's kind of what's that initial impression that you want to give, that you're a designer that cares about execution, that cares about the detail. It's really important to see. Second one's around showcasing your process. So knowing that you can do all the steps of a designer. So all the way through design thinking, it's what's the problem you're solving? What's the research you'll do to validate that problem? How do you kind of bring the team on board with running workshops, doing ideation exercises and things? And then how do you come up with those early designs? How do you validate them with some testing with users? And then all the way up to releasing them and working with engineers and then putting them back out into the open and seeing how people react to them. That's your full process as a designer. If you can communicate that clearly and what happened at each step in a summarized way, then you're all the way there. That's exactly what design managers and hirers are looking for. And also what didn't work. So we know, as I mentioned before, it's not always perfect. It's absolutely fine to include that in your portfolio, and actually it's great and very refreshing to see. And the last one's on business impact. So I touched on this around what's the ROI, return on investment of the design work you're doing. So every business hires a design and product team. They cost a lot of money to hire. The reason why they're hired is because they bring a lot of value back to the business by getting more users in, getting them to buy more products, or maybe partnerships, whatever the business model is. That's what we're here to do. It's not to create a great visual design immersive experience. It's delivering on those business requirements. So being aware of those, working towards them and talking about them is a designer's superpower. And it's something that we talk a lot about at Crafted, of understanding that product strategy and talking about that and working to that along your projects. Okay, so we're just going to finish with some bits on Crafted and some of the courses we run and a little bit about our values. And then we'll go into some questions at the end if anyone has any. So yeah, Crafted, essentially we have four key values that we look to keep to. So one is that we're very focused on design frameworks. So there's a lot of courses out there that will sort of snowball you with a lot of theory, a lot of frameworks that aren't really relevant in roles in the day to day. So we kind of pick the ones that are used and very practical in working in startups, working in scaled businesses, and using them in a very practical way. We also work with a lot of industry case studies. So from myself and other design leaders that run the courses, we have a lot of real case studies that have happened with real data that we can share with you. So if you're going to go into the industry and work on a project, you'll be fully immersed in exactly how we work, and to step forward with your front foot in that sense. So we really pride ourselves in a lot of case studies and industry examples because it's the best way to learn hands-on. And we spend a lot of time looking at career and portfolio coaching. So we don't want to just deliver a course to you that pushes you on to the next stage and sort of lets you find your feet in the job world, which is very challenging at times. We're here to support you with advice on your portfolio and kind of coach you through that process to help you find that initial role. And you'll be part of the community, which you'll get access to certain learning documents, also live events and things like that we run, just like this. And the last ones, we just want to be really accessible. So there's a lot of design education out there that exists today, some very entry level around things like Udemy, but it's very basic. Some cost thousands, like General Assembly. There's no need to spend that amount of money to learn the skills you need to become a designer. A lot of it is to learn the basics, the foundation, and then practice yourself, get that guidance, that mentoring and coaching, and you will get to where you need to get to. So we really want to make it as successful as possible to help people get into design careers. And we run 3 courses at the moment. So the first course is around sort of foundation. So if you're someone that's completely new to design, maybe thinking of a career transition, it's kind of the perfect course for you. So we go through modules in the design process. We learn how to do research. We do ideation, designing. You create your own prototype, and we still have time to go through career guidance. We do live coaching. They're very collaborative in the sessions that we run twice a week. And that's what Foundation is. Academy is a little bit more detailed in product strategy and design principles and user testing. And that's sort of more perfect for you if you're maybe in a more junior role, have some experience but want to build on it. And then our professional course is a very immersive 12-week course that gives you a full-fledged portfolio afterwards, a lot of industry case studies and some live projects that you'll work on. And we go into more detail around business strategy, requirements and modeling as well. So you might be able to see this on your screens, but as I mentioned, these are kind of the difference between our courses. So our academy course is a bit more strategy-led, a bit more testing-led, and our professional course goes into more detail around things like prioritization, behavioral psychology in UX, so how people make decisions and why they make those decisions. It's great to give that backing to your ideas and designs. How you work with AI tools today as well. And then throughout all of these courses, you'll create a case study and you'll present it, you'll get feedback on them. That's something that we really pride ourselves on, is that immersive collaborative feedback amongst the working group and also with the design leaders that you'll work with. Other things that we include is, so also the live sessions that I mentioned twice a week. You'll have access to a Slack channel throughout the whole process to ask any questions you want whenever you like. You'll get lifetime access to those resources. You'll also get course certificates that you can share on your LinkedIn that as certified design course. And you'll be part of the community as I mentioned already. And just mentioning a few that are coming up. So we're running some more live events like the talk I'm doing today. Next week, we've got one around getting started in UX. So a little bit more hands-on around if you want to get into your first junior role, what are the steps that you should take? We've got a session that go through a little bit more detail on design portfolios and how to build a great portfolio. And then we've got some courses coming up in April. So we've got a few spaces left on our foundation course. Still got another course at the end of April. And we've got our next academy course running in May. So if you're interested, then reach out and go through the site. So just finishing up today, if you want to get access to this presentation that we've gone through, then scan the QR code and sign up to our community. So it'll show you the page on the right-hand side. Just add your name and your email, and we'll send over the presentation. You'll also get early access to events that we run in the future before we put them on Meetup, because they do get booked up quite quickly. So yeah, join the community. We send out newsletters on a regular basis with some design insights, also some job roles as well. So if you're interested, then scan the QR code and sign up. And that's it for today. So hopefully that was a useful session. Have a little bit of time now to go through any questions if you have any. No question is too small or too silly, I always say. It's completely open floor for you guys.
I did have a question. Thanks for that, Luke. That was really nice.
No worries,
So
go for it.
actually a researcher, and I've been doing that as a freelancer for 9 years now, so I do have some experience. And
Hmm.
in my last two projects, and actually in more of them, I ended up being the person doing the UX wireframes. So that gives you some
Hmm.
sort of experience, I guess. And well, the industry right now is a bit funny, and all the AI tools coming in definitely have affected, I think, the hiring process, especially around research.
Mm.
I'm seeing more and more designers doing research, more and more product managers doing the research. And is it now a time to maybe pivot into either of those? I guess is the question. And I've been looking into that a little bit.
Mm.
So the question there is, I guess, I personally think handling the of UX side of things is kind of a different skill set to the UI. And
Mhm.
what would you suggest in terms of that gap?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think my view personally is that UX research is really important and should be a role in itself. And I've always worked with researchers in teams across all scales of businesses because, as you say, the research takes a long time to get those insights, to summarize them, to gather them, and then the designer has to take them forward, and takes a lot of capacity as well. There is definitely a trend of I've seen in the market and heard from other peers around sort of less researcher roles. I think, as you mentioned, especially in smaller teams, the product designer does take on that kind of early research phase. So, especially with businesses that have smaller budgets and are shrinking, the product designer is responsible for that. So, if your question is more around how can you kind of help, I guess, build your skill set to maybe be open to those kind of roles, I think being sort of competent in UX design is a great starting point. It sounds like you have exposure to it. You have maybe the ability to learn from other designers in your business today, but just doing a little bit of your side research, getting a mentor in that sense, doing a short course could also help with those skills. Um, Also, I guess designer roles, it's good to point out, are normally paid higher than researchers generally. So if that's something that you're interested in salary wise, it's something to consider. Um, so yeah, hopefully that answers your question, but happy to clarify anything else
Yeah.
there.
I guess it's more the industry is a bit difficult for those that just setting up, I guess, with 0 to 3 years of experience in both fields, research, design, product, and
Mm.
just pure UX. Wireframing, does that really count into those? Just jumping through the junior side of things into mid and senior somehow. So I guess the main question.
Yeah, so I think UX does, so the industry does change every 3 or 4 years, I'd say, of how jobs are described. And when I worked, excuse me, in agencies about 7 years ago, there was always a UX designer and a UI designer. There were two different roles, and you do two different things. Over the years, they've definitely become a single role as, again, budgets have shrunk in businesses, and people want to get those T-shaped designers, as I talked about earlier, to cover everything. So to answer your question, I think just being a UX designer probably isn't enough to get the roles that are available today, unless you're working at very specific design agencies that might have that split, but that's quite uncommon. So I think to set you up for success, and I'll give anyone advice, is to kind of learn that broader product design skill set. So from research to the designing, to understanding the business strategy, to delivering to engineers. So having that kind of awareness of those skills. You don't need to be an expert in them at all. There's always there's always gaps. I'm still not a great visual designer, but I might lean more heavily in the UX strategy side. And that sort of goes with moving into design leadership. The hands-on stuff isn't as important as other ones. But yeah, I think to summarize on your question, it's probably important to learn that broader skill set now, and so you're available for other roles because UX roles specifically are less and less common in the industry.
All right, thank
Cool.
you.
No worries. So another question from the chat. So most projects have a compliance issue for sharing it publicly. In that case, what do we showcase in the portfolio? That's a really common question that get quite a lot, so it's a good one to ask. So there's many ways that you can show your work, even if there is an NDA that might be signed in your contract. So essentially, you can show your designs, but you can sort of, let's say, blur out some of the detail. What you can show though is your process, and if you want to replace some of the content in your final designs, then you can. Also, just using your professional judgment as well. So I always kind of advertise to have a password protection on your website. Don't have that publicly available if you do have designs that you've worked on, and then only when you have an interview and you talk through it with a hiring manager, you take them through that. And never in my experience have I ever heard, or from my own experience, that any sort of NDA or compliance has been crossed because they know that what you're sharing, and you can say at the start, this can't be shared, this can't be recorded, it's under NDA, but I'm happy to show you this in the presentation in this interview. So you can kind of get around that at the start as well if you want to. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to make more work for yourself. You've done the great work already. Um, and if you just handle it in a sensitive way, that's the way I'd always recommend it. If there's anything that's very sensitive, then you can, like I say, pixelate out or blur out the content, but I wouldn't say that's needed most of the time. Hopefully that answers your question. Um, no worries. Hope you feel better soon. Um, any other questions there, guys? No worries. If not, well, thanks for joining today. Enjoyed having a discussion. And as I mentioned, if you have sign up to the community, I'll send over the presentation. And if you have any other questions, generally about design careers and your journey, then feel free to message me on LinkedIn, or through Meetup if you'd like to, and I can help you as much as I can. Okay, well, nice to catch up with you all guys, and I hope you enjoy your weekends. It's meant to be a sunny one. All the best and take care.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
All right, cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.